You are listening to a podcast from The Hindu.
So, who do you find more good looking, cheetah or a leopard?
I absolutely love the cheetahs. But that said, the leopard is a far smarter animal. I mean, the cheetah has its own challenges because the leopard can always drag its prey and take it up to the trees, and a cheetah can't follow after. And the cheetah actually is very timid also. It kind of runs off. In fact, it's one of the reasons why the cheetah is always dominated by the existing leopards in our various lands.
And has been sort of pushed into the margins, and
Yeah.
we're forced to bring them.
The cheetah has to fight the leopard in India to kind of survive.
Yeah, and which is why we have had to bring in 2022 batches of cheetahs
From South Africa and Namibia.
I am Jacob Koshy.
And I'm Sobhana Nair, and this is the
Rearview. Here we dive into the history of things, events, discoveries, and inventions.
So today's episode is about return of the cheetah. But before we delve into the details, I want to introduce the animal to you. And I'm going to do it through the eyes of a 16th century cheetah trainer.
So we have to go back 500 years to an animal that you see on Nat Geo.
Totally, because he knows him more intimately than you can ever know
I'm all ears.
cheetah through the screen.
The fastest animal on land. The cheetah.
So here's what a cheetah trainer whose account has been recorded in a 1578 manual called Shikare Nama Kutub Shahi from the Golconda. Here's what he had to say. First, when it hunts, it sits in ambush until it is certain of bringing down its prey and only then makes the pounce. Second, it knows when its master wants it to hunt, but it does not follow him like a dog. It waits to be carried, confident in the assumption that he needs me. Why should I humiliate myself? Third, a cheetah only needs to be told it should not eat its food, and it refrains from doing so, unlike a dog which learns this only after being punished. Fourth, the cheetah does not eat carrion, it only eats fresh meat. And finally, if it does not succeed in running down its prey, it gives up after 5 or up to 7 attempts, exemplifying the wisdom of avoiding endless toil for the sake of others. It almost sounds like a modern dating manual. What do you
Absolutely. It seems like one of those very classy beasts, and not unlike all those, not like our irritating dog and cat pets who constantly want stuff out of us.
I'm sure people will be after you for saying such lines,
I
Jacob.
like my wild animals in the wild where they belong. But anyway,
So, Jacob, we are discussing cheetah today. Why are we discussing cheetah today?
well, the big reason is because the cheetahs were once in India, they went extinct, and now they are back.
चीता लौट आए हैं नई ऊर्जा के साथ चीतों के पुनर्वास के लिए जुट गया
In 2022, the biggest media event, at least, after all the dreary days of COVID-19, was that, we were having batches of cheetah being imported from South Africa and Namibia. And there was so much fanfare, so much anticipation around it. And those animals were specially flown in, and you had none less than Prime Minister Narendra Modi actually flying down to Kuno, and where these animals were flown in, and he released them into the wild.
Yeah, I remember those visuals of Prime Minister standing with a big camera in his hands and somebody cranking up the doors.
Yeah, they're
The
just
trap
peeping
door.
out.
Yeah.
And the animals just looking stunned and surprised. Oh my God, where's the Africa that we know?
Yeah.
But it's a bit unusual, right? I mean, Prime Minister of a country coming to, going to releasing some animals into the wild. I mean, is it something that politicians generally do, like associate themselves with wildlife and make an event out of it?
We do have the example of Project Tiger in front of us, and Indira Gandhi's involvement in the whole project. She was not just involved in her capacity as the Prime Minister of the country, she was quite a nature enthusiast. And
Yes.
it was not just tigers, she even cared a lot about the birds. And we have seen how she paid sort of extended her patronage to
Does it
Dr.
pay
Salim Ali.
political dividends in any way when, politicians espouse their proximity with, tigers and wild animals?
Well, politics is all about optics, and surely such beautiful company of such beautiful animals makes for beautiful pictures and beautiful headlines. And I'm sure every now and then we all need a break from the routine. And the the fact is that wildlife does not exist in isolation. So when you are caring for wildlife, you're also caring for the forests and those who are dependent on
Yes, in
forests.
fact, I mean, it's not, optics is, of course, one very big part. But even Project Tiger, when it was conceived, it was actually to save the tiger because, again, there was a time when India had thousands of tigers and their numbers dwindled dramatically. And ecologists and environmentalists and conservationists basically set out a plan saying that if at all we don't want all our tigers to just get extinguished or vanish, you have to put in place spaces for them. So that's how we have Project Tiger. Project Tiger essentially meant the creation of dedicated tiger reserves. You also saw that forests where where a lot of tribals live, some of them had to be moved out of the forest such that connecting tiger corridors, where the animal could move from one end of the country to the other or even beyond the country seamlessly without fears of getting hunted or poached. That was the whole idea of, so to preserve an ecology and is one of the main reasons for having this thing. And even with the cheetah too, minus all the optics, there was a very strong conservation element.
That's the question I wanted to ask, because I am quite stumped. Why is it that we are so keen to bring cheetahs all the way from Africa to reintroduce them in the Indian jungles? What's the reasoning behind it?
Yes. So all of the, just as in Project Tiger, you had several hardcore forest reserves, green forest reserves being rejuvenated and preserved for the tiger. The cheetah is a grasslands animal. All those lovely pictures and videos that we've been seeing through the eons of, cheetahs running wild in the savannas, etc. Now, India we have our own grasslands ecosystem in many parts of Maharashtra, Madhya Pradesh, Chhattisgarh. Now, these grasslands are not what people generally think of when they think of forests, which is all green and deciduous trees. But these are important biotic systems too, and they need preservation. There are many animals that are dependent on this. So the idea, and this is a very old idea in conservation biology, is that if you have one keystone species,
one protagonist to hold the plot together,
one very agile, good-looking, stylish animal, it kind of has a ripple effect. It's like how a Shah Rukh Khan could carry an entire movie and everybody else benefits.
Yeah.
So you have this one, you introduce a species. In this case, it's the cheetah. If it roams around in the grasslands, it's got a wide coverage area, right? So those regions get preserved. Other fauna also start and can also thrive alongside it. You have the cheetah, all of their prey base basically, and other secondary animals. So the whole point is, people are drawn to that place. Funds start pouring in, even from international, agencies. So overall, it benefits an ecosystem. It benefits the overall forest of the country, and of course, it makes for those wonderful optics.
Yeah. So basically, what you're saying is that cheetah is our Shah Rukh Khan, and under Shah Rukh Khan, all the minor actors will survive.
Kind of.
But one thing is there which I have never been able to distinguish between, say, a cheetah and a leopard. Don't they look same? How is one supposed to tell them apart?
Well, they are both cats.
Yeah,
And
clearly.
among all the, they're among the two members of the big cat family. But actually, they are fairly easy to tell apart
No.
in one way. I mean, the cheetah has oval spots. Dark colored spots distributed all across the body. Whereas the leopard has rosettes. It's basically concentric circles where it is not really a full spot. It is like a circle. It is shaped like a badly drawn rose, I would imagine. So it's called a rosette. The leopard is a smaller animal. It is very muscular, and it is capable of climbing trees, for instance. Whereas the cheetah is a much larger, more aquiline, more streamlined animal. Hence, all the 100cc bikes of a time would always, have cheetahs running along with them to show off the speed of bikes and all that. So it had this. It's longer. Even if you have an animal.
So who do you find more good looking, cheetah or a leopard?
I absolutely love the cheetahs. But that said, the leopard is a far smarter animal. The cheetah has its own challenges because the leopard can always drag its prey and take it up to the trees, and a cheetah can't follow after. And the cheetah actually is very timid also. It kind of runs off. In fact, that's one of the, and we will come to it in some while, but it's one of the reasons why the cheetah is always dominated by the existing leopards in our various lands.
And has been sort of pushed into the margins, and we're forced to bring them.
The cheetah has to fight the leopard in India to kind of survive.
Yeah, and which is why we have had to bring in 2022 batches of cheetahs from Africa.
Absolutely. But interestingly, we've got these animals coming in from South Africa and Namibia. But this really is not the first time that cheetahs have been brought to India from Africa, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And there are interesting, if you were to turn the pages of history, there are interesting episodes.
You have to go back 500 years again?
No, I've a little less than 500 years. I'm talking about World War One. Now, that should be more current.
Yeah, that's kind of like the same century that I was born, but on different ends. Okay.
If we were to turn the pages of history, Jacob, and here I'm referring to a brilliant book written by Divya Bhanu Singh, The Story of Indian Cheetahs.
Absolutely. Beautifully illustrated too. Right?
Absolutely. Such a gorgeous piece of work. And he mentions that just before the First World War broke in 1914, Maharaja Bhav Singh Ji, the ruler of Bhavnagar, sent his superintendent of police, Krishna Chandra Singh, who was lovingly called Popat Bhai Sahab. I'm only going to refer to him as Popat Bhai Sahab because I think
Popat
that's
is parrot.
such an endearing name.
Yes.
Yeah, Parrot Bhai Sahab went to Kenya to obtain the first cheetah. Now, it is not clear if Popat Bhai returned with the cheetah or not, but subsequently, African cheetahs were brought in ones and twos through traders in Bhavnagar. And Bhavnagar reportedly had about 12 to 30 cheetahs in their menagerie from 1930 to 1945.
Wow.
And so obviously, Mr. Modi is not the first Gujarati to get cheetahs from Africa, clearly.
And since we're talking about Gujaratis and trading, how much should these cheetahs actually cost?
So, as per Divya Bhanu Singh's book again, in 1918, the landing cost in Bombay of an animal from Africa was roughly 500 rupees. But by 1945, the price had gone up to rupees 1,000.
So it was a prized commodity. And this is 1918 terms. So I'm guessing by today's inflation standards, it would be, a few hundred thousands, So certainly affordable for people who can throw destination weddings and get Rihanna to dance.
Absolutely. If the trend had held, probably it was not Rihanna, but a cheetah prancing on the stage at the said wedding, I must say.
Yeah. I absolutely fancy myself in some way, being this Gaddafi kind of guy, who had cheetahs and leopards in his palace, I believe. Or
So, Jacob, but what is this obsession with among all these royals to get cheetahs from Africa? I can understand today you're talking in terms of ecology, we need to reintroduce these
Sure.
animals, but why were the royals importing them?
Well, it was for that. There was no environmental consciousness surrounding it. It was purely for this ancient art of coursing, and which is very much like hunting. So, unlike hunting, where you just directly go and shoot an animal dead, coursing is when you employ an animal. You use an animal to chase down your eventual target, and and the cheetah was, I mean, in and this was there's history to it. The zamindars and the rich royals, they got on they adopted some of the habits that they'd seen from the British colonial people who were ruling the country. And so cheetah was an animal considered excellent for coursing because of its speed. I mean, it can touch like 100 kilometers an hour, and it's easy for that animal to just charge and bring down something like a black buck or a cheetah or a sambar, which and it was part of a tradition that went on like hundreds of years.
To serve the prey on a platter for the Maharaja to kill and then later brag about.
Kind of like, because the cheetah goes and brings down the prey, and then the human hunter, actually just goes and finishes off the job.
The job. Yeah, this is very interesting.
It's an animal that runs at 100 kilometers per hour. So how do you catch such an animal in the first place? I mean, how did all these royals and how did our princely hunters go about this job?
So again, I'll take you back to the pages of Divya Bhanu Singh's excellent book, and he pulls out records from Akbar's reign. Akbar, as you know, had maintained extensive records of his administration, and his biographer Abul Fazl has this great book, Aine Akbari, recording every minute detail about his administration. And in Aine Akbari, there is also a passage on how the cheetahs were caught. So Abul Fazl writes that they used to dig deep pits in paths frequented by the cheetahs. Often they would fall into them and break their legs, and sometimes they managed to just jump out. So, realizing this, Akbar devised shallow pits with automatic trapdoors which would close once the animal fell in.
Wow.
So, there's this really interesting
That's
passage.
so brutal. I mean, you actually wait for the animal to fall into a pit, it breaks its leg. Okay.
Yeah, well, that's how you catch a animal which is running at 100 kmph. So anyhow, but there is this interesting passage which you will find interesting. This is from Aine Akbari. Listen in. On one occasion, no less than 7 cheetahs were caught. At the time of their heat, which takes place in winter, a female cheetah had been walking about on the field, and 6 male cheetahs were after her. Accidentally, she fell into a pit, and her male companions, unwilling to let her off, dropped in one after the other.
This is
This is
multiple levels of brutality, and
this is
I'm
literally
stunned.
yeah, this is literally the pitfalls of dating. I'm telling you.
very well put, I would say. Okay, so following the pitfalls of dating, the animals have been caught and snared. But it's a wild animal, and how do you acclimatize it to court life, or something, or wherever they live? How do you tame them, and how do you?
Yeah, so there was an extremely brutal method through which these animals were trained.
There's more brutality coming in.
Absolutely, we shall not spare any grim detail.
I love my slasher movies.
Yeah.
I don't mind them.
Totally. Brace yourself. So here's what I found in Divya Bhanu Singh's book, and he has pulled out a paragraph from Manasalosa, which was an encyclopedic treatise from the court of Chalukya king Someshwara III. It prescribes a combination of seclusion and humiliation. Cheetah, it says, are first to be paraded around the town in ropes and nets. And after a rather humiliating turn around the town square, they're kept in captivity for the next several days. At all times, they're bound by shackles, nearly paralyzing them. These ropes are released one by one when the trainer believes the cheetah has been duly subdued, giving it freedom in small installments. Next, it has to relearn how to hunt. So, an antelope, preferably one with a broken leg, is placed before the cheetah at a distance, offering an easy hunt. Another manual, and a rather brutal one, Jacob, brace yourself, from the princely state of Baroda instructs the traders to keep the cheetah in a constant state of anxiety.
Anxiety.
Yeah, totally. Captured cheetah, it says, should be kept on the cot and turned from one side to the other by the hour. Fear and anger keep it from eating during this time, and in time it is duly subdued.
Ways the cheetahs just don't turn on their trainers and just slash them to death for all this brutalities on them. Come on, imagine somebody kicking you every night.
Yeah, but just okay, I will give you another example. Imagine all the EMI slaves. Don't we continue working despite the fact that it gives us so much anxiety?
We're not tied around and have little ropes.
Aren't you, Jacob? Aren't you?
Okay. The cheetahs must pay their EMIs to stay in the royal menagerie. Excellent.
Now they've been they've been captured, they've been trained. But the problem with the cheetahs is that they did not breed in captivity.
I'm not surprised if you actually treat them so badly. How the hell are they going to get into the mood for making more of them?
Well, we have the concept of arranged marriages, don't we?
Of course.
But cheetahs did not believe in arranged marriages. And in 1613, great Emperor Akbar's son Jahangir recorded that his father had collected over 1,000 cheetahs in the hope of them mating and multiplying, but the cheetahs obviously had a mind of their own. And cheetah breeding continues to be a problem even to date, right?
Absolutely, because especially in captivity, even there have been all kinds of horror stories about female cheetahs being led into where the male cheetahs are, or vice versa, and sometimes the animals end up attacking each other, many times fatally. So it is it's a very it's a species that is very circumspect, and it actually requires it to be in the wild for having their best chances at breeding.
So by the turn of the 20th century, there were alarm bells ringing about the dwindling population of
Clearly,
cheetahs.
because all these animals were being brought in. They are felled into pits, and they just basically sort of wild. They do not breed, and there's the demand. Hunting and coursing are the key sports of both the Britishers as well as the royals. So naturally, the numbers are just dwindling.
And guess whose heart bled for the cheetahs, Jacob? Among the British...
Mine would. Among the British.
among the British administrative heads that we have had.
Enlighten me.
Lord Curzon.
Really?
The very...
Curzon of the great divider of Bengal.
Absolutely. The great divider of Bengal. His heart bled for cheetahs, and in fact he was one of the first viceroys of India to actually issue instructions to not kill the poor animal in
I never can imagine Curzon as an environmentalist and ecologist and animal lover. What things surprise you from history, right? That's why we do this podcast.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, so when was the last time that we had cheetahs in wild in India?
So with all the hunting going around, the numbers were rapidly dwindling, and even all the imports from Africa couldn't really keep up. And coincidentally, in the same year that India won its freedom, turns out that in the December of that year, in 1947, Maharaja Ramanuj Pratap Singh Deo of the erstwhile state of Korea in present-day Chhattisgarh, was out driving at night when he chanced upon 3 male cheetahs, and he shot them without any hesitation. I believe from all of the records that we see, though there have been some stray instances where people have mentioned, but this really is
Sightings of stray sightings of cheetahs.
but they're not really confirmed. But I believe that this was around the time when the last cheetahs in the wild were actually found in India.
Okay, so but Jacob, the 2022
Return.
episode of Return of the Cheetah is not the very first time the Indian government is making an effort to reintroduce cheetah in Indian
Absolutely
forests,
not.
right?
So, in fact, almost immediately after the cheetahs went extinct, there was great consternation on the part of the then government that, how did we allow this beast, which was so plentiful in our country, to just go extinct? And already efforts started to be made in trying to get this animal back. So in the early 1970s, N.K. Ranjit Singh, he was then the Director of Wildlife for the Government of India, and he's still a very well-known and active, committed, wildlife activist and person. So he initiated this very interesting program to get the Asian cheetah. I mean, that was the species of cheetah that is found in India. To get the Asian cheetah from Iran, because they were the same species. And the deal was that in exchange for their cheetahs, we given some of our Asiatic lions. Both countries have a long history of, again, engagement with both of these with these animals.
So we've been trying to repopulate our jungles with cheetahs as far back as 1970s.
Absolutely. And then
why did we want to bring cheetahs from Iran and not use the African route that we're using now?
Because the African cheetah is considered a different species, and there were questions raised as to how.
And Iranian cheetahs are more our race.
They are like the Asian species of cheetah, and these are the only 2 regions actually, which actually house cheetahs.
One assumes that just like the difference between African elephants and the Indian elephants, there are minor differences between the 2 kinds.
Absolutely. And so there were concerns that the African cheetah would be facing a completely different kind of environment, and whether it would be able to appropriately breed over here. So these attempts to get the cheetahs from Iran, they were not really successful, because Sobhana, it was 1975, India was in the midst of an emergency, and in 1979, the Iran government, the Shah of Iran, had essentially
was unseated, yeah.
Absolutely. And this whole cheetah lion exchange program did not really go very well. So, but at the end of it, it would have been a great program, because Ranjit Singh actually had this very detailed proposal where he would be getting the cheetah to come to the run of Kutch, where there is thousands of kilometers of untrammeled grassland, where the cheetah could have run by. And there was a chinkara, all of its favorite prey that would have really made its life worth. But it was that was not to be. But the efforts never really dwindled. I mean, even as early as 2005, there were always committees. And this time, I mean, as time went, more and more conservationists, more and more wildlife experts got into debating the best way to get the animals back into India. And in fact, sometimes they once tried out one of the most bizarre methods to actually repopulate the India. And this involved cloning the cheetah.
No.
Absolutely. So there is the Center for Cellular and Molecular Biology in Hyderabad. It's one of our premier biotechnology and genomics institute. So they had a very effervescent and very dashing kind of leader called by the name of Dr. Lalji Singh. He came out with a very detailed proposal on how the cheetah could be cloned. So you take cells from the cheetah, use cloning techniques, and you incubate them within within a leopard as as its host. So
My God. So a cross between cheetah and a leopard, or would it actually be a replicate of the
well,
cheetah?
it would actually technically, it would very much be 100% cheetah, because the womb would not really genetically influence the animal within.
Oh, I thought finally one will not have to work to distinguish between the two.
No, those questions will always remain. But it was fanciful work, because this was very much like the cloning of Dolly the sheep, where Ian Wilmot basically cloned an entire sheep. But this was still science that was not really well established, not really well tested.
And there were all these fears of raising a Frankenstein monster.
Indeed. And moreover, but it did turn out that, they had representatives from the Iranian government who came and examined the facilities at CCNB. But one never really knows why this great plan didn't actually pan out. We never know. And I don't know how that.
Imagine what would you do to be a fly on the wall to
I absolutely
witness this firsthand.
Yeah. Well, I'm not sure I wanted to witness the cloning bit, but I get your point. But anyway, this was again one of the what ifs of Indian science history. But as time progressed, there came a larger consensus among the wildlife conservation community that it was probably okay to get even African cheetahs, because the angle this time had turned not really to just revive the Asian cheetah, but to have cheetahs in India for ecological purposes, for conservation processes. So that is how talks started between India and several countries in Africa, South Africa, Namibia, even Kenya to some extent.
So, are these African cheetahs having a good stay here in India? Are they replicating? Are they finally breeding?
Well, they are breeding. We've had several cubs born. So about 20 cheetah came in the first batch, in September and over the next few months. And they are still living in kind of relative luxury in the wild. They're not all in the true wild. Some animals did not survive. And as of now, we have about 13 adult cheetah. But counting all the cubs, altogether we have 27 animals right now. Now, the ecologists were not, and the biologists who thought that African cheetahs would not, would have problems in India, they weren't entirely wrong. Because it turned out that some of the cheetahs developed something called a winter coat. That is, it was as part of a natural biological response, they grow an extra layer of fur, during winters in Africa. But winters, because Africa is in the southern hemisphere, India is in the north. When they came to India, some of those animals during peak summer started to grow those fur, and then there were monsoons, and some of these animals got infected, and plus they were collared. They were constantly had to have this heavy collar down there.
Summer is so painful.
Yes.
Imagine walking around with your winter coat on a summer day.
It's the modern equivalent of falling in the pits and breaking your legs, I guess.
Truly.
Not fun for them at all. And some of those animals actually succumb to those, to those winter coat infections, as they call. But these animals they get the very best of care. I mean, you have extremely knowledgeable. I mean, there are committees from both countries staffed with conservationists and wildlife experts from Namibia and India, who are monitoring the health and progress
On a daily
every day.
basis.
Yeah.
But Jacob, as you just said, that these animals are not really in a wild in the wild. They are in a curated space as of now. So we would know whether they are thriving only when they're actually pushed into the wild and where they interact with the more dominant leopards and other.
So by October, I mean, few of the adult cheetahs are already in the wild. Some of them still are inside. But these are not really enclosed. They are, they're not cages. They're what's called boas, which are basically separations. And these are like a kilometer wide, and, it's a square kilometer in area. Plenty of space. They have, antelope coming in. And there are also the leopards sometimes who still compete and then steal those antelopes away. So that problem continues. There is already talk that the next batch of cheetah will be brought in somewhere by the end of this year or early next year. And they will be relocated in another sanctuary called Gandhi Sagar, which is adjacent to the Kuno Park. The whole point is we need to have there needs to be about 5 or 6 introductions. I mean, about 50 cheetah need to be bought. And eventually, once you have a viable population of about 35, you can have this self-sustaining Indian cheetah population. And the hope is that once these African cheetahs spend enough time in India, we could say that the Indian cheetahs over time, I mean, they become Indian, I guess their passports are already Indian.
Yeah,
Those
they will
Indian
be
cheetahs
naturalized citizens of India.
Indeed.
Although, well,
with their
that's
own other cards, I guess.
I'm sure. We definitely haven't heard the last of the cheetahs of Kuno and possibly of Gandhi Sagar or wherever they're being relocated.
Absolutely. That's all we have time for today. Keep listening to the Rearview. Many more episodes ahead on the intersections of history, science, events, and
Whatever takes our fancy.
absolutely. Thank you very much, Shota.
Thank you, Jacob.